In this week's episode of Working with Work, we're going to learn from the world's top DJs. Hello and welcome to episode 20 of my it's episode 21 of my Working with Work series. And in this week's episode, we're going to talk about how the world's top international DJs and music producers manage their time. And the reason we're doing this week is because I have just come off from my Ultra Career weekend, which I do every single year. It always inspires me both in terms of my own productivity and it inspires me in my own workshops and lectures because I learn so much from these DJs about how to entertain a crowd. Now, I don't get 40,000 people in one arena and present to. I wish I did. It would be my dream come true. But I really do learn about how they can build up the excitement and then slow it down and build it up again. They are absolutely amazing people, which is presumably why they are the world's top DJs and are in so much demand. But I've been an electronic dance music fan for many, many years. I've been a fan since the early 1990s when house music came onto the scene. Now, the reason why I see a link here between entertainment and productivity is the fact that the world's top DJs are flying all over the world every single day, and some of their schedules are just unbelievably busy because they're dealing with many different time zones. Now, I have a really, really good example, and it's a true story. About 2 years ago, David Guetta, and hopefully you have heard of David Guetta performed at the Ultra Career. Now, I know that he was also performing in Ibiza, just off the coast of Spain, on the Friday night before he played in Korea. Now, the thing about this was, the time zone difference, fortunately for him, was that Korea is about 8 or 9 hours ahead of Ibiza time. So he has to finish his set or finish his performance in Ibiza, which I think was about 2 a.m. He then boarded a plane, flew to Korea, landed in Korea about 1 hour before his set was due to start. He was driven to the stadium. Fortunately, it's not that far away from the airport. And he was straight back on stage. And he performed brilliantly. I mean, it's still to this day the best performance I've seen at Ultra Career. And he was amazing. But how does he do that? Because that's not just one unusual day. That's every day in the life of David Guetta. And it's not just David Guetta. It's also Steve Angelo. It's also Alesso. It's also Nicky Romero, who was also performing here last night. These guys are doing this day in, day out. And on top of all that, they are producing new music almost at least once or twice a year. Now, if anyone's involved in the music industry, I'm sure you know that creating an album or even just creating one new song is not something you can do in 5 minutes. It takes a lot of time. Now, one of the things I've noticed about DJs, and as I say, I have actually looked into this a lot. I've read many articles about how they do it. I've watched interviews, and a guy called Laidback Luke, who's also an amazing DJ, he actually has a daily vlog that you can actually subscribe to and see how he actually puts together his day. Actually, speaking of Laidback Luke, that guy is actually more amazing than most because he's also a martial arts performer, and he performs in martial arts competitions again all over the world, mainly in Asia to be fair, but he performs in doing martial arts, and on top of that he's a music producer and an international DJ. But I did look into how these guys do that, and one of the things that I learned from these guys is that they actually have quite a lot of creative time. Now, the dance music festival season and also the Ibiza season essentially starts round about springtime and it finishes at the end of autumn, usually about September, October time. So between October and say February, it is a bit of a downtime for the DJs, although they are still performing. Of course, they have New Year's Eve parties to perform all over the world. But one of the things that they do is in that downtime, they go into the studio. And they spend a long time in the studio. Now, there's a great movie out there actually on Swedish house Mafia. I think they did 2 movies. The first one was called One, and I think the second one is called The Final Tour or something. Both, if you're into music, both are certainly worth watching. They are a real eye-opener of how these guys are actually managing their time. Because all of these, particularly the Swedish house Mafia guys, Alesso, Axwell, Steve Angelo and Ingrosso, all of those guys are married. They have kids and they have family and they need to spend time with their families as well, but yet they're performing all over the world every day. But they do manage it. And when the Swedish house Mafia were together, they were putting together an album and they were creating new music. And what they did was they actually went off to, I think in the second movie, they went off to Australia to put together their final song. And that final song was amazing, by the way. But they actually went to a place where there was pretty much no internet. It was out of the way. It was like a beach house in the middle of winter. And they sat in the studio and they worked and worked and worked. And they put together the final song. And they had deadlines. I think they had 5 days to do it, and they managed to get that song put together before having to fly out and get back to their performance and their tour that they were on at that time. But what I noticed about these DJs is they actually block off time. They've got performance time and they've got studio time. And they put together their studio time when they're together, and they will go into that studio and there is nothing but working on that song or album that they're doing. Now, the studio time could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They've got 3 days and they set that deadline and they work. I mean, they really, really work. They fall asleep on the sofa, they wake up, they're straight back into it. It's really, really focused, dedicated work. And that is something for most of us. And I found this the same. Last week, my wife and I we're putting together the finishing touches to an online course that a lecture series that we're working on for our communications company. We had to tidy up the website, we had to set up the web page, and we had to get the translation from English to Korean done. And that takes time. But my wife and I sat down on Thursday and we said we were going to get this done. And you know, we had the deadline of 6 p.m. because my wife had to go off and teach, and sure enough, we finished it. So what I'm trying to tell you in this long story, you can tell I have a passion for music, so I can get away off and go on all sorts of like diversions. But the key point of this episode is when you start feeling overwhelmed, believe me, there is a simple way of handling this. All you need to do is start using your schedule and stick to it. And block off time for key projects that you're working on. So when you do your weekly review, which I hope you are doing now, I mean, we talk about that all the time. When you're doing your weekly review, look at your calendar ahead. Look for the days that are likely to be quiet. So the days when you don't have many meetings and the days when you don't have any off-site calls to do, then use those days to do complete focused work. Take your phone, turn it upside down, or take your phone, just turn all the notifications off, and just sit down and get into that focused mind. You know, many people call it the zone. But if you can schedule at least 1 day a week, and you actually plan out before, not the day, but before the day, what you are going to achieve in that time, you will find that you will achieve whatever it is that you want to do. There is a saying that the work that you have to do will fill up the time that you have available. Well, that's okay if you're blocking off time, because you can plan that. And I strongly recommend that you, when you do your weekly review on a weekend, or whenever you do your weekly review, take some time out to look at your calendar, figure out your quiet days. And we all have quiet days. We have crazy days, of course, but we also have a few days when they're not so busy. And schedule some time in your calendar that is non-negotiable to sit down and get on with that project that you need to get finished. It really, really does work. These DJs are doing it every single day. You can take advantage of that, and you can get into seeing how to get this focused work and the important projects completed when you need to get them completed. I'm going to put a link into the notes section below to Laidback Luke's playlist for his vlog. They're only about 5 minutes longer each episode, but I strongly recommend that you take a look at some of them. They are pretty amazing how he's doing and putting together his sets, his music, and indeed his martial arts practice. If he can do it, I can tell you now you can do it, because Laidback Luke is only human, just like you. So whatever happens, if those guys can do it, I promise you, you can do it. But you do need to be focused, you do need to know what you're doing, and you do need to be fully aware of what's coming up on your calendar. Okay, thanks very much for watching this episode. My voice will be back to normal next week, I hope. But in the meantime, I wish you all a very, very productive week, and I will see you in the next episode.